Hello.
Hi.
Hi, how's it going?
Hi. Yeah, I'm doing good. How are you?
Yeah, doing well, thank you. Is now still a good time to talk?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Do you want to start off then maybe by telling me a bit about yourself, how much experience you have, where you're up to with the interviewing process, that kind of thing?
Mm, sure. So I am Ben. I am working as a front-end developer in Singapore. So my experience is mainly in web front-end, and I have about 3.5 years experience in front-end, and in my job I deal with the promotional discounts features on an e-commerce platform. So this is something that is used mainly in Asia. We also have some in Latin America, but the main market is in Southeast Asia and Taiwan. And currently, I am in the process of preparing for on-site interview for Google, and my interviews will be in about 2 weeks time, 2.5 weeks time. So I'm hoping to have more practice to get used to the environment and the pressure. So thank you for being here.
And what level are you interviewing for?
I think it's still L4, the junior one, because I don't have the system design interview.
Okay, so L4, right?
Mm.
Okay, cool. And did you do a phone interview or just the on-site?
Um, it was a phone interview. I had a phone interview. So the next round is a virtual on-site. So it's still an online interview, a phone
Yeah,
interview.
sure, but you did the phone interview already?
Yes, I did one. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so in that case, what we'll do is we will go ahead with a mock interview. It will be 45 minutes long, just like a real Google interview.
Yep.
And after we finish the interview, then we can discuss feedback and that kind of thing, okay?
Okay, sure.
Okay, cool. So what programming language do you want to use?
I will use Java.
Java, okay, cool. And if it's okay, actually, let's switch it back to plain text. And
Okay.
the reason that I say that is because with the interviewing.io platform, sometimes it might highlight certain errors in your code, that kind of thing, which won't happen in a Google interview. In a Google interview, you'll get things like syntax highlighting, but that's it. You won't be able to run your code or debug it or anything like that. So I think it's best if we stick with plain text, okay?
Okay, sure.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. So let me just make a note of the time before we begin. So it's around 7:04 where I am. So that means we'll go to 7:49 for the interview, and then we'll discuss feedback afterwards, okay?
Okay.
Are you ready to begin?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So what I'll do is I will read out the question bit by bit, and I will also copy and paste it so you can read it for yourself, okay?
Sure.
Sounds good?
Yep.
Okay. So the employee score for an employee is equal to the total number of direct and indirect employees that report to that employee, then +1. And the +1 here means that we are adding the employee itself as self-reporting. So I'll copy and paste that so far. Good to read. Let me know if it makes sense, and then I'll continue with the question.
Okay. So, right. Okay. Okay. +1. So that is the employee themselves. Okay. Understand. Okay.
Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So an employee without any other employees reporting to it will have a score of 1. Okay? And each employee has a unique ID. And given a direct report map where the key is the ID, then the value will be an array of IDs who directly report to the key. And the map contain all employees. Okay, so again, I'll copy and paste that. And now maybe let's have a look at a map as an example, okay?
Okay.
Okay, cool. So as you can see in this map here, we have 1, 2, 3. That's the employee. That's the ID of one of the employees. And it has 2 employees that directly report to it. It has 2, 3, 4, and 3, 4, 5, right? And then if we look at 2, 3, 4, that also has 2 employees that report to it. 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8, 9. And then if you look at 3, 4, 5, that has no one that reports to it. Same with 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8, 9. Does that make sense?
Okay. Can I assume that no employee will report to themselves?
Can you say that again?
Can I assume that no employee will report to themselves? Like there won't be a case where, for example, 3, 4, 5, and then the direct employee is themselves, right? 3, 4, 5, for example.
Also, we'll talk about that kind of thing in a minute, okay?
Okay.
Sure. So let's just have a look then. So could you tell me what's the score for 7, 8, 9?
7, 8, 9. So they don't have any employee directly reporting to them. Okay. But they report to 2, 3, 4.
Right.
So the score is still 1 because there's no one under them. So they only have themselves.
And what's the score for 1, 2, 3?
For 1, 2, 3, we have to go to the score of 2, 3, 4 plus score of 3, 4, 5 and plus 1. So 2, 3, 4, the score of 4, 5, 6 is 1. 7, 8, 9 is also 1. So 3, 4 will be 3. And then 3, 4, 5 is 1. So 1, 2, 3 will be 3 plus 1 plus 1. So it's 5.
Okay, great. Awesome. Okay, so now let's think about when the map might be invalid, okay? So essentially, let's think about this as being a real company. So we're trying to think about what situations would make it, essentially not make sense. So again, I don't care about kind of your data types or anything like that. I'm thinking more from a business perspective. What data could we put in this map that wouldn't really make sense? Something that would be invalid from a business perspective, okay?
I think it would be that an employee that is supposed to report to someone above turns out to be the boss of that employee. So, for example, if we have 1, 2, 3, 4 reporting to 1, 2, 3, if in the array of 2, 3, 4, we also have 1, 2, 3, that doesn't make sense because 2, 3, 4 is supposed to be the boss of 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3 is supposed to be the boss of 2, 3, 4. So if we have the reverse also being true, that doesn't make sense.
Okay, sure. Anything else?
I think someone cannot be the boss of themselves. So,
okay, cool.
Other than that, okay, so we can't have the reverse relationship, and we can't have an employee being the boss of themselves. I guess an empty map is also, it's strange that it's also possible. So it's like a totally empty map, there's no employee, or maybe there's one employee who has no direct person reporting to them. That's
so
possible.
I guess an empty map just means the company has no employees. And if it has one employee, then that's also fine. So I think those two would be valid.
Okay. So for the invalid cases, I guess I'm currently only thinking of those 2 cases.
Okay, cool. So let's write them down. And so the first one you said was essentially manager can't report to their report, essentially, right?
Right.
Yeah. And number 2 was
no one
employee
can report to themselves.
can't be boss of themselves, right?
Yeah.
I guess we could say can't, if we want to use the same terminology, can't report to themselves.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So let me fix that. Okay, cool. So I'll tell you some other situations. So another one is that a employee can't have more than one manager.
Oh, right. I see.
So for example, let's say I put 4, 5, 6 over here. And the question is, who's the manager of 4, 5, 6? Is it 2, 3, 4? Is it 3, 4, 5? We don't know, right?
Mm.
So an employee only has one manager. Okay.
Okay.
And also the final one is company has only one CEO. Okay.
That means only one person with no boss.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Oh. Right.
So, and we could actually look at the one and two, and we can probably generalize that a little bit more as well, because say you have 1, 2, 3, and then you have 2, 3, 4, and you have 2, 3, 4, and 4, 5, 6. If I put 1, 2, 3 reporting to 4, 5, 6, that's also a problem, right?
Mm.
So it's not just manager can't report to their report, it's to essentially any of their reports. So if you want to be a bit more general, you could say like I'm going to say like no loops, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Does that
Understood.
make sense?
Yeah. So indirect report, the managers cannot report to either direct or indirect reports.
Exactly.
Okay. Understand.
Yeah. So no loops, can't have more than one manager, and company has only one CEO. Does that all make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So now let's go ahead and write some code. Okay. So let's begin by writing a function. Okay. And the input to the function will be an employee ID. And what you have to do is you have to calculate the score for that employee. Okay. And let's say that the direct report map is going to be a global variable, and you can access that variable anywhere in your code, okay? And let's also assume that the map that you're given is valid, i.e. all of these three rules that we spoke about, you don't need to worry about them. There's no loops, every employee has one manager, and the company only has one CEO, so that's all fine. So assume map is valid. Does that make sense?
Okay. Can I also assume that the employee ID will always exist in the map, or will there be a case where we don't have that employee at all?
You can't assume that, no.
Okay. Understand. Okay. So if the employee doesn't exist, we can just return 0 since we don't even have the employee in the first place.
Okay.
So looking at these three rules, I think we can essentially represent this map as it visually is like a tree because there's only one root. There's no loop, and every node has only one parent. It has maximum one parent because except for the root. Yeah. So if we want to calculate the score for each of the node, I think we can go recursively. Let me see. So for every for every node, the score of that node is like recursively the sum of score of every node, every child in that node, and then plus one. So in the case whereby that node doesn't have any children, then this part will just be 0 and we have 1. And then we can do this recursively. So for example, if our query is 1, 2, 3, we recursively call the score function on 2, 3, 4 and 3, 4, 5. And then when we get to 4, 5, 6, we get 1, and then 7, 8, 9 we also get 1, and so on and so forth. So I think that's the direction that I will go for.
Okay, sounds good.
Yep. Okay, let me think of any other thing that I have to take care of. That sounds okay. Yeah, I think we have the direction.
Okay.
So yeah. For that, we'll access each employee and the indirect and direct report only once. So each node only get accessed at most once. So that should be in time complexity is a linear ON. Yeah, n is the size of the node. Yeah. I think we can start coding already.
Okay.
Okay. So let's say we have we need to return the score for the employee, and let's just say it's the score, and then the input is okay. So let me see. I'm just trying to see the type of the employee ID. So the employee ID will actually be an integer, or is it a string?
That's up to you.
Okay.
Whatever you want.
I think I would prefer it to be string. It can also be integer. It's just that if the range of the employee ID is higher than, for example, the integer range, then that would be a bit just a bit troublesome. So I think yeah, I think maybe a string would be good.
So can you just explain again why you prefer string over integer?
I think that for string we will be able to have a larger range of employee ID for
Okay.
integer. If let's say the range in the problem statement itself can go very, very large, then I guess here we are using a math, so it might not be an issue, but I just feel that if we use string, we can have a larger range of numbers. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So right, this one will be our recursive function. So what I need first is that in the beginning our sum score is 0, and then we will find recursively for the score for each of the report of this EID. So I will need to get the so it will be an array of string. The report will be an array of string. So okay. Now it reminds me that I need to take care of the case whereby so I think we can let's call the map employee map. So if the best case is that if the employee map doesn't contain our EID, we should return 0. Otherwise, we will find the sum of the score of our direct report and then +1. So for every person report to us, we will find the score for that person, and then okay, so this is essentially the gist of it, but let's see whether it will whether it is correct. So if the company doesn't contain this employee, we return 0 because there's no such person. Otherwise, we will get some of all the direct report.
Okay. So now let's imagine that this function is going to get called many times, right? So
yeah.
If I call it, say, with 1, 2, 3, then the first time it's going to calculate it, and if I call it again, it will also calculate it every single time. So is there a way that you could maybe improve it so that if I call it multiple times, we get a better efficiency?
Oh, even if I get score 1, 2, 3 multiple times outside, is it?
Right. So 1 second. I'm gonna mark this as V1. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Now let's go down here. Let's do V2. If you want, you can copy and paste some of V1 if you want to, but essentially, let's make a new version where it's more efficient if you call it repeatedly.
Okay. So if we have made that score to the same employee ID, I guess we can store that score number in a global map. So it can be something. It can just be a hash map actually. So it will keep track of our so let's say score map. Let's just say score map, and we will keep the score of our employee based on the ID. So here it's still the same. If the company doesn't have that person, we will return 0. Otherwise, if the score map actually contains this person already, then we can return from our, it's like a memorization method. So everything else should be the same. So I think, let's say if the count can be very large, then we might need long chain instead of integer. But yeah, otherwise you can use integer. Yeah. Okay, so after I calculate this, then I have to store this score of this person inside the map, so that this time I can access it directly. So
Okay, awesome. So now let's try V3. Okay. So V3 essentially is that if you look at your V2, it's good in that the first time you call it, it calculates it, and then every other time you return it from your map, right? But let's say we want it to be even better, such that the first time you call it, it returns in 01 time. Okay? So can you think what you would do in order to make it, even the first time that you call it, be something like 01 time? And again, feel free to copy and paste any of your previous code if you want.
Oh, right. Okay, so if we want to do that, I think because we need to calculate recursively the direct report for the first time. So if we want such that get score always return constant time, I feel that one way is just to calculate everyone in the beginning.
Okay.
That means I need a helper function. Okay. So if I want to calculate everyone in the beginning, then I need to, it's something like try to get score from the CEO so that everyone below would be calculated. So that means I need to try to find our CEO and then okay, so get score here becomes get score of the whole tree. And then our O1 operation is basically to get from the map. That's what I'm thinking. So it's like a very heavy pre-computation kind of.
Okay.
Yeah. So okay. So now get score is okay. So I will have a okay. I will find the CO and then I will calculate score from there, and now get score will probably be just like return score map. So I will leave this first, and for calculate score, first I need to find who is the roots of this tree. So I think to do that, there's a few ways. One of the way is to go through let me think. One of the ways is to try to find the one who has no direct report. And how do I do that? Let's say every time I have, okay, so for every entry then that value for that entry, we can have an incoming edge count for each of the number inside the arrays, and the one which incoming count is 0 is the root of the tree. Okay, so I guess I can do that. It will be a linear traversal of the map. So something like let me think. Okay, let me see. So I need another map basically to store the counts. Yeah, to store the counts, or maybe just to store the employees. Let me think. Maybe I don't need the counts. Maybe I just have a report, have a set of all the reports so far. So the CEO should not appear in this set.
Okay.
So maybe we can still. Okay, so for every I still okay for key inside the employee map key set. Okay, so then okay, so it's actually we will get this key. We will add report person inside. We don't need to add the key. We just need to add everyone inside the report array. So now again I have to go to the key set, and if I find someone which is not inside the reports, then it will be our CEO. So if I will have the root ID and if our report doesn't contain the key, if it doesn't contain our key, then this is our root, and we can break. So in the case that there's no root, I guess that's where the environment is basically empty. Then we don't have to calculate any score. Basically, it will be everyone is 0. So I guess we can still if the root ID is not empty, then we will try to okay, so if the root ID length is more than 0, then here we will calculate the score. Okay, I probably need another helper function just to get the score. So maybe I will need to rename this. Okay, never mind. We just have it for helper. So this one will actually do the calculation, and we will call it here. So
okay.
Yes, so this one is not done yet, and then yeah, so this is our pre-processing step, and wait, I need to okay, so score map, I still need the score map as a global variable. So then for the calculate score, it will be the one that is doing the okay, so here I will calculate from the root. So the let's call helper is the one that is doing the heavy lifting.
Okay.
Otherwise, this one. So by the time we call get score, we should have the score that ready. Yeah. So there shouldn't be a case whereby employee map has that ID and score map doesn't. So here, let me just paste that here. So let me think. Okay. Well, actually, okay. So here is the helper. Here, the ID should exist in our employee map, and we can also copy this part up, I guess, just for better defense. Okay, let me just check it. And here is not get score anymore, but it is our own function. And so this one is the one that will do the recursive in our report. If we call report on it, and then we put it in our score map. So this one cannot be void, it has to be integer. So this one will be on. This one will be constant, but this one is the on one.
Okay.
This is our pre-processing function.
Okay, cool. So if you remember early on line 16, 17, 18, we spoke about 3 situations when the map is not valid, right? So maybe, do you want to pick one of those situations now? Up to you which one you want to pick. And can you write a function that will validate the map to see if that is true or not? So for example, if you pick the first one, you have to see, does the map contain loops or not? If you pick the second one, you have to verify for every employee, do they only have one manager? And for the third one, you would have to verify, does the company only have one CEO? So pick one of these 3 and write a function that is for validation, okay?
Okay. I think the third one might be the second and third one is probably related, because in this case, for example, we can still have the hash map to keep count of how many incoming edges go to this node. So if this node has more than one incoming edge, for example, like here 234 will have 1, but if it's somewhere along the line, for example 234, if it appears here, then we increase the incoming count. So any case someone has more than one incoming edge to them, then 2 will be invalidated. And in the end, we can also try to check how many nodes has 0 incoming edge. That means they have, if we have more than one node with 0 incoming edge, that means we have more than one CEO, so 3 will also be invalidated. So I think the more tricky one is the no loop.
Okay.
I'll try to do this. In order to do this, we can try to use, it will be easier to use DFS than BFS, because it's more relevant to use def first here. So using, okay, so we have to check for all loops. So that means, okay, maybe I still need to find the CEO. Yeah. So we start searching from our CEO. if there's any, and then we DFS from that node, and we keep track of the nodes that have been visited so far. If any node is visited twice, then there's a loop. So let me think. Can I take it that the part about finding the CEO is taken care of?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Can I because like if we want to find the loop, then we have to give s from the root of the tree. Can I take it that the root of the tree is given, or do I have to find the root of the tree again?
Well, so if you don't know if there are loops, how do you know what the root is?
Oh yeah. Right. So in the beginning, if the map is not empty and yet there is no CEO, then there must be a loop somewhere. Otherwise, if there is a CEO, then we will have to DFS from that CEO, because we don't know yet at that point whether there is a loop down along the line. So in the beginning, I still have to check the incoming edges for the nodes, and check for the one that has 0 incoming edge. If there's no such node and the map is not empty, that means we don't have any root. But if there's a root, then I have to DFS from there, because I don't know, even though I have a root, I don't know there's a loop along the bottom.
Okay.
Let me think. Okay, so I think let me see. Healing. I think, okay, so let me try to do the validate loop part. So I think,
can you say that again?
sorry, I think I'll try to do the validate no loop part.
Okay, sure.
So I think I can borrow some of the code from here. Change. Maybe link it here. We will need call this the help of us, because yeah, we will still try to find a root ID. Okay, so I think in the beginning, we'll defend against the case whereby the employee map is empty first. Then now we try to find the root. So if we can find the root, so maybe just we can put in. Wait, let me think. So okay, let us use this as our main. So if the map is empty, then there's no loop. But if
so just to clarify, when will your function return true and when will it return false?
Yes, so it will return true if there is a loop. Okay, so if we cannot find any CEO, and the map is not empty, then there is a loop. Otherwise, will DFS from our group. So here, let's just say that we also can't be sure whether there's only one CEO, so there might be more than one CEO, but in that case, then we have to DFS multiple CEO. Yeah, that means here I have to store a list of CEO for. Can we for the sake of this task, can we assume that the condition 3 and 2 are all validated?
We don't know that now.
Oh, okay, sure. So I think I actually have to store all the group ID. So if we don't have a report, then it's more like our IDs. So group IDs, we insert the key, and then if there's no CEO, then there must be some kind of group. Otherwise, we will have to use DFS. So okay, so I think the DFS can also return a boolean. And we also have the employee ID here, and you will need to store. Okay, so we will need to store visit note. We have to store a visit notes list sets, a set of visit notes here. So to mark that, we have visited that note already. So if the visited has already contained this employee, that means there is a loop. Otherwise, we add it to the list, and for every report below this person, if that also leads to a loop, then we can true. If all this condition is if none of the direct and indirect employee cost a loop, we can return false. So here in our invalid loop, I have to visit all the CEOs. So for all the IDs inside the IDs, okay. So for all of this, because the part about each employee only has one manager might not be validated, so there might be a time where we have two parents, even though it doesn't cause a loop. So we have to refresh the visited set every time, and then okay, if this root ID costs a loop, then we can shortcut here. Okay, so basically, this part is just pre-processing like previously to find all the root IDs. So the main part is to perform DFS on all all the trees inside the forest, but it might be. And I think the tricky part is like if someone has more than one manager, then if we don't refresh the visit set, then we will run into the like false positive here. So I think yeah, maybe a better way to check for no loop might be using something like topological sort instead.
Can you say that again, please?
So I think for the topological sort is basically to find valid order of this forest such that the node behind a certain node is like the nodes behind will be the children of the nodes in front. So if we have such a valid ordering in that with that strict rule, that means there is no loop inside our graph or forest. If we can't find such an order, then there's no loop. So there is some loop in between. That one it will solve the problem of having one whole loop or that there is a root and then some loop in between, instead of this part where I have to find whether there is such a CEO or not. And yeah, so if we use topological sort, it will take care of the no CEO and the SEO and loop in the below. It will take care of both cases.
Okay, cool. So we have around 2 minutes left of the interview now, okay? So if this was a normal interview, I would normally leave maybe 5 minutes at the end in case the person I'm interviewing has any questions for me, that kind of thing. But seeing as this is a mock interview, I think because we only have 2 minutes, I think it makes sense to go to the feedback now, okay?
Sure.
Okay, cool. So I'll just kind of go through my notes. So I began by presenting the question to you, and you asked about if employees can report to themselves. I then asked you about the score for 7, 8, 9 and 1, 2, 3, and you got that all correct. So that was good. I then asked you about invalid cases. So you mentioned about manager can't report to their report and that they can't be a boss of themselves. And then you also spoke about what happens if there's an empty map or map with one employee. So that was all good. So then I gave you the other ones about having one CEO and not having more than one manager. So then I presented kind of version 1 of the question. And you asked about if an employee might not exist. Yeah, that's a good question to ask. It's always kind of good to validate your inputs. So yeah, that was a good question. And you said that you could return 0 in that case. And then you also mentioned that the map is a bit like a tree because it has no loops in it and it only has one parent. And you mentioned about using recursion. And you wrote a comment on line 23, which I thought was nice, which kind of explains how the recursion works. I thought, yeah, line 23 was good. And you also proactively spoke about the time complexity and said that it would be O of n. So that was good. So then you got through to your implementation. I would say you had a good variable names, good function names, so that was good. I guess one small thing is that on line 30, you initialize the score to 0. But if you want, you could actually just initialize it to 1, and that would also work. And then you can remove the +1 at the very end. So that's a small improvement you could do. Another thing is on line 28, where you return 0 if the map doesn't contain the key. Personally, I would probably throw an exception here, I think, because if you return 0, say you're calculating the score for 1, 2, 3, right? And somewhere deep down in the tree, you find an employee who doesn't exist. That means you're still going to return the score for 1, 2, 3, but it will kind of be inaccurate, right? So personally, I would say in this case, it makes more sense to throw an exception because then you know that something has really gone wrong, that the map isn't correct. So that's what I would say as opposed to returning 0, because if it returns 0, you don't know that anything is wrong. Whereas if you throw an exception, then you know. Okay?
Okay.
Cool. So then we got to version 2, which was about kind of essentially caching it, if we call it more than once. So yes, you made another map, that was fine. And then you kind of on line 47, you check the map, and on line 55, you add to the map, and as you can see, actually, if you initialize the score to 1, then you can remove the +1 and 2 places now. So that's kind of just another small thing. And you spoke about memorization, and then one thing you spoke about is that maybe an integer might be too small. So you mentioned that in that case, maybe you could use a different data type, so that was also fine. One thing that I also thought was interesting was you mentioned about using a string as the data type for employee ID. And I think the reason you gave was that a string can have more values than an integer, which, that's definitely true. But I guess if you're thinking realistically, an integer can have somewhere between 2 and 4 billion values. So it would have to be a very, very large company if it has more than 2 billion people. So sure, I understand what you're saying, that a string has more values than an integer, but realistically, an integer should always be fine for employee ID, right? I guess maybe a different argument you can make would be that if it's an integer, then employee IDs are kind of predictable and easy to guess. Whereas if it's a string, then it could be some kind of random string, and then it's kind of harder for people to guess IDs. That might be something, I don't know. But anyway, so that's just kind of a small thing. So then we got to version 3, which was about how do we make it even more efficient. And you mentioned that you could calculate the score for everyone at the beginning, and you said that you would first find this, and you said the way that you would do this is you would get the score of the CEO, and then you'd calculate everyone below them. And then you said, of course, you need to find the CEO, and you said maybe you could look at incoming edge counts, and the one who has 0 incoming edges will be the root. Then you decided to do a different approach, which was actually on line 63, you create a hash set of all your reports, and then you add everyone to there. And then when you find an employee who's not in that set, then they must be the CEO. That works fine. Of course, though, you're using some more storage there. So another approach you could have done actually is you could have used your existing getScore function from version 2 and just call it for every employee. That's probably a simpler way of doing it, I would say. Just iterate through every employee in the map and calculate the score. And if you think about it, you don't need to worry about efficiency there, because if you call it for someone that you've already called before, then it will just return immediately, right? So say if you're lucky and the first employee in the map is the CEO, then you will calculate for everyone, then you're good. And then even though you're still iterating through the map, it will return immediately for all of them. So personally, I would say it's probably simpler and also a bit more efficient when it comes to space, just to iterate through all the employees, calculate the score, and then that's fine. And then actually, you don't need to modify the getScore function. You can actually keep the getScore function identical as version 2, and then when people call it, it will just return from the map immediately. Does that make sense?
Okay, I understand. Okay.
One small thing was, again, on line 70, you initialized root ID as empty string. That's fine. Maybe I would have done null. That might have been a bit clearer. Than on line 78, you can just say if it's not null. That's another approach. But again, not really a big deal. So then, what else? Let me think. So if you have a look, calculate score helper at line 84 is very, very similar to what getScore used to be, right? The only real difference is it never reads from the map, right? It only ever writes into the map on line 95. So again, if you kept it as the original where it does read from the map, then you could just kind of iterate through all the employees and get the score. So then at this point, we started talking about validation again, and you spoke about kind of which approaches to use. You said that you were going to choose the no loops one, and that using a DFS makes sense for here. And you said that you could start from the CEO, but then we kind of spoke about how do you know who the CEO is if there might be a loop. And you're asking, can you assume that the root is given? I said, again, that might not be possible. So you thought about it a bit more, and then you kind of began kind of doing your function for validating loop. One small thing is on line 112, you called the function validate loop, which, as you saw when I asked you the question, it wasn't clear what does it return. So personally, I would rename the function to maybe be like has loop, or and then it's clear has loop. If it returns true, that means it does have a loop. If it returns false, that means it doesn't have a loop. So I'll probably rename the function just to make it a little clearer. So then, right, you asked if you could assume that the other two conditions are true, and I said no, because if you could assume that, that means you'd have to validate those ones first, and in order to validate those ones, they might depend on having no loops. So it's almost a bit circular. So that's why essentially you need to validate that there's no loops in isolation of the other two conditions, right?
Right.
Right. So you had this global visited set on line 110, but then you reset it on line 134, which is fine. And if you think about it, actually, so the main chunk of what you do from line 113 to 131 essentially is finding all the CEOs.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, that's not really necessary. Really, what you could do on line 133 instead is just iterate through the entire map. Go through every employee and do DFS, right? And then for any employee, if you find a loop, if DFS returns true for any employee, then you know you have a loop. So actually, you could probably delete all the code from line, I guess, 115 to 131. Does that make sense?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, does that make sense to you?
Let me think. I think my concern is that if I do the DFS from a non-CEO node, and next time I want to check the CEO node that might contain this node, then I'll have to run DFS again.
Sure.
If there's only I think if each employee has only one manager, then that should be okay. Let me think, because then I don't need to reinitialize this. Let me think.
Or another approach that you could do is you could do DFS for every employee, and you could also maybe cache the results maybe, and then if you run it for their manager, then you can check, so maybe inside your DFS function, maybe you could do a cache, perhaps. That might be another version.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, and that's just kind of some feedback on that. Overall, one thing I would say is you use kind of a hash set sometimes in your solution, which is good. And I understand why you're using a hash set, because they have order one lookup time and they enforce uniqueness. But I think in general, it's probably good whenever you use any data structure to state why are you using it, and then the person interviewing you, then they know explicitly, they've chosen a set because of these reasons. Whereas if you don't state it, it's not 100% clear why you chose that one. So essentially, anytime you use a data structure, I would state why you're using it instead of something else. Another good thing is throughout your solutions, you always used helper functions, which kind of made the code easier to read. So that was nice. And then, yes, towards the end, we started talking about topological sort. But yeah, so let's kind of now do a summary, right? So you said you're interviewing for L4, right?
Yeah.
So I would say for L4, this was a good interview. You had no trouble at the very beginning, calculating the score, and you also did version 2, version 3. You did them all very easily. Version 4, again, the validation was all fine. As you saw, there were some tweaks maybe to improve upon it, but overall it was still good. You had good communication the whole time. You were always explaining to me what you were thinking and your approach. That was all good. Yeah, I gave you some feedback maybe where you might be able to improve, but I think it was a good interview. And if this was a real interview, I would definitely recommend a hire for this.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time. I think I learned a lot from this also. Yeah.
Sure. Do you have any questions for me?
Okay. I think so for this, I think for this case, it's I didn't really go through the test cases after I write each version. Do you think that even if they're supposed to have a few versions afterwards, do you think that it would be better if I try to at least go through some of the test cases in some of the versions?
I guess what I would do is I would ask the interviewer, when you finish, say the code, say, do you want me to test it? And if they say yes, then that's good. Whereas, in this case, as you can see, there were many, many parts to the question. So I could see that your code was correct. So I didn't ask you to test it in this case. But, for another question, it might make more sense. So essentially, what I would do is when you're interviewing, when you finish writing some code, you can ask the interviewer, do you want me to test it? And then they can say yes or no.
Okay. Understand. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I think I don't have any other questions. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And do you need any resources for interviewing? There's a good book that I've used in the past. It's called Elements of Programming Interviews. I'll just write it on line
Okay.
153.
Okay.
It's a book. You can get it in like Java, C++, Python, whichever one you want. And yeah, I think it's a really good book. It has a lot of questions in it, and the questions are difficult questions. And if you can do those questions, then you have no concerns, I would say.
Okay. Thank you. I will do that.
If you have time, maybe check it out. If you don't have time, that's also fine.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Anything else?
I think that's it for now. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, well done. I thought it was a good interview. And yeah, good luck.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Have a good evening. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.